Hey guys, tonight we listen to a relaxing story. You get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's begin the story. If you drive far enough north through Vermont, past the maple stands and the old rail cut that hasn't carried freight since Truman was in office, you'll reach a stretch of land locals simply call the Flats. It isn't on most maps anymore. The road turns to gravel, then to dirt, and then to a narrow trail that threads between birch trunks and low fog that never seems to lift. That was where the town of Greybridge once stood. At least, that's what the 1853 Atlas of New England Settlements calls it. Small type, population 216, noted for fine dairy and clockworks. The next edition, printed in 1870, repeats the entry. After 1900, the name disappears. Not changed, not renamed, just gone, as if the printer had forgotten a line of type. When I first read about Greybridge, it was only a footnote in a census summary. Census incomplete. Returns delayed from Greybridge, Wyndham Company, owing to clerical difficulties. The same phrase appears every decade afterward until the line itself vanishes. No fires, no epidemics, no record of evacuation. Nothing. Just a hole where a town used to be. The oddest part wasn't its disappearance, but its manners. Every surviving letter from Greybridge, 12 that I've located in private collections and university archives, ends with the same curious benediction. May time be kind until the clock forgives us. It reads like a regional proverb, but the phrase appears nowhere else in American correspondence. Not in neighboring towns, not in newspapers, not even in sermons. Only in Greybridge. When historians lose a town, we usually blame the elements: flood, fire, economics. Vermont has seen plenty of all three, but Greybridge's absence felt deliberate. You can sense it when you handle the documents. The way the ink fades unevenly, the way dates blur into one another. The past resists you, as if the town itself has agreed to be forgotten. According to state records, Greybridge was founded in 1791 by a clockmaker named Jonathan Pell, who moved north from Massachusetts after an argument with his guild. His skill was famous, his temperament less so. The charter lists Pell as master horologist and governor pro tempore. Under his signature appears a peculiar line in Latin: Nullum horologium duodecimum pulsat. No clock shall strike 12. It seems like a joke, a craftsman's flourish. But the line is repeated in the town's early bylaws, right beside ordinances about property lines and livestock. For over a century, Greybridge kept clocks that never struck midnight. Every town record, from shop ledgers to church registers, ends at 11:59. That was what drew me north on a wet April morning, armed with a field recorder, a notebook, and the kind of optimism only historians and treasure hunters share. I wanted to see what remained, to hear, perhaps, what a town sounded like when it refused to reach the end of the hour. The rain began somewhere near Brattleboro, a slow, misting rain that blurred the trees into watercolor. By the time I reached the turnoff, visibility had shrunk to a few yards. The GPS showed only blank green. The dirt road curved, dipped, and finally widened into what might once have been a common. A few stone foundations jutted through the grass, and a row of lilac bushes stood in improbable bloom. No signs, no markers, only silence thick enough that I could hear the steady beat of water dripping from my coat sleeve. I parked beside a toppled milestone and read the carving through the moss. G1 mile. That arrow pointed into fog. There was no road now, only a faint depression leading into trees that leaned together overhead like pages closing on a book. Somewhere in that quiet, I imagined a sound, metal faintly ticking. It could have been the cooling of my car engine, or something older still, buried beneath the sod, keeping time that no one had asked it to keep. If this tone feels right, calm, documentary, gently uncanny, I can continue straight into section 2 of the chapter, where the narrator begins describing the first written evidence of Greybridge's rule and the letters preserved in a museum collection. Would you like me to keep going with that next section? The next morning, the rain had lifted, but a film of fog still lay over the flats like smoke that refused to clear. I drove to Montpelier, hoping for records, anything more than the scattered notes I'd already seen. The Vermont Historical Society's archive was small, but the archivist, an older man named Harlan Keats, had been there long enough to know where things were buried, both literally and bureaucratically. Greybridge, I said at the desk. He frowned, repeating the name as if tasting something metallic. Haven't heard that one in a while, he said. That's one of the towns that moved, right? Moved? I asked. He shrugged. That's what folks said. Whole settlement pulled up and resettled closer to the river back in the late 1800s. Only thing is, no record of where it went. He disappeared into the stacks, leaving me with the faint hum of fluorescent lights. When he returned, he carried a slim box bound in string and labeled in pencil. Greybridge Caress, 1820 to 1894. Inside were 12 letters, the same I'd read in transcription, but here in fragile, crumbling reality. The paper had browned around the edges, and some ink had bled into the fibers like veins. Each began normally enough: weather, crops, the occasional dispute over grazing land. But they all ended with the same sign-off. May time be kind, until the clock forgives us. I copied the phrase again into my notebook, even though I knew it by heart. That was when I noticed something strange. In each letter, the handwriting near the closing line changed, just slightly, but consistently. The slant leaned left instead of right. The loops grew tighter. It was as if someone else, or something else, had added that final blessing after the letter was written. When I pointed this out to Harlan, he nodded slowly. "I've seen that before," he said. "Used to be a superstition among some clockmakers. They believed time was alive in a way. You could offend it if you kept it waiting too long. Like missing an appointment?" He smiled faintly, like letting the hour strike without acknowledging it. I think they called it the blessing of the forgiven hour. He rummaged through a drawer and produced a pamphlet printed in 1841, a sermon on the temptations of time by Reverend Ezra Pell. Pell? I asked. As in Jonathan Pell, the founder? His grandson, Harlan said, preached in Greybridge until 1898. After that, nothing. The pamphlet was thin, printed on rough rag paper. In its final pages, the Reverend warned his congregation against seeking to master the hour. Man may measure minutes, it read, but he may not own them. When the 12th hour comes, the soul must bow. For those who keep the clock from striking 12 deny God his dominion over time. At the bottom of the page, a handwritten note in faded ink. Father says the 12th toll frees the maker. Until then, he waits. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the phrase over and over in my mind. The maker waits. Was it a metaphor? Or had the Pells, a family of clockmakers, taken their craft so seriously that they created something they couldn't control? I imagine the clang of bells frozen at 11:59 echoing through an empty valley, a town where midnight never came, where people lived their lives 1 minute short of completion. I returned to the flats 2 days later, armed with a reverend's pamphlet and a half-dozen photocopies. The path was the same, overgrown, silent, but this time I followed it farther. After about a mile, I came upon what must have been the church. Only the foundation remained, its stones cracked by frost. A wooden cross lay rotting in the grass. Near the base of the old wall, I found something that stopped me cold. A circle of iron gears, arranged carefully like a sundial. At its center, half buried in dirt, lay a brass plate engraved with the words, "When the clock forgives US, we shall rest." The air felt heavier then, not cold exactly, but thick, as though the fog itself were listening. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, then fell silent. For the first time since arriving in Vermont, I felt the odd sense that I wasn't discovering history. I was trespassing on it. As the evening came, the light grew dim and gold across the trees. I sat near the ruins and wrote a note in my field journal. The townspeople believed that time itself punished them. The forgiveness they sought may have been literal, perhaps a ritual at midnight. Need to verify with records from neighboring towns. When I closed the journal, I heard something faint, a single chime. Not the hollow clang of a bell, but a crisp metallic tick, as if from a clock just winding up. I turned. Nothing moved in the fog. And yet, as I stood, I realized the forest had gone completely still. Even the rain dripping from branches had ceased. I checked my watch. It read 11:59. Then, as if on cue, the second hand stopped. For exactly 13 heartbeats, the world stood motionless. And then, just as suddenly, the ticking resumed. Not from my watch, but from somewhere else, deep within the fog. I left before the hour changed. That night, back at the inn in Brattleboro, I dreamed of a room filled with clocks. Hundreds of them. Tall, brass, ornate, pendulums swinging in slow unison. And at the center of it all stood a man, or what had once been a man, his eyes too turning gears, his voice a hollow echo. He looked up and said, softly, "You've written it down, haven't you?" I woke to the faint sound of ticking. My recorder, left on the bedside table, was running. When I played it back, all I heard was silence, until the final second. A whisper, barely audible. "May time be kind." Then the tape ended. I returned to Greybridge one final time, or at least that's what I told myself when I packed the car before dawn. The road north was washed clean by last night's storm. Mist hung low over the fields, curling around fence posts like smoke. The locals had begun to recognize me at the diner in Brattleboro, though they said little. When I mentioned Greybridge, they always fell quiet. One woman muttered something that stuck with me. "You shouldn't be out there when the light starts to bend." I didn't ask what she meant. By now, I was learning that in Vermont, silence was a kind of answer. The ruins of the church looked different that morning, not in structure, but in atmosphere. The fog had retreated, revealing the outline of a bell tower long since collapsed. The bell itself, if it ever existed, was nowhere to be seen. I climbed what remained of the stone steps and found a wooden crate buried under debris. Inside were scraps of hymnals, brittle and nearly transparent. On the back of one page, in elegant looping script, someone had written, "If the bell should ring at 12, none shall remain to hear it." The ink was darker than the rest, newer perhaps. But how new could it be when no one had lived here for over a century? I set up my field recorder again. The microphone hissed softly in the stillness. I began to narrate, half from my notes, half to steady myself. "Greybridge church site," I said aloud. "No remaining structures beyond the foundation. Written evidence suggests ritual avoidance of midnight chimes, possibly religious or psychological in nature." My own voice sounded smaller out here, absorbed by the trees. As I spoke, a faint echo rose behind me, as if someone else were repeating the words a half-second too late. I turned off the recorder. Silence. Only the whisper of wind through the birches. Still, the echo lingered in my mind, like a skipped groove on an old record. A few hours later, I met with Dr. Ruth Fenwick, a local historian from Dartmouth who'd written briefly about lost New England parishes. We met in a cafe overlooking the Connecticut River. When I mentioned Greybridge, she pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Ah," she said, "the town with no midnight. You've heard of it." "Only rumors," she said. "Most scholars dismissed it as a folktale. But there's an entry in the diocese archives, a reprimand from 1864. It accused Reverend Ezra Pell of tampering with the sanctity of the hour. He was ordered to restore the church bell, but the record ends abruptly that winter." What does that mean, tampering with the sanctity of the hour? Dr. Fenwick hesitated before answering. In the 19th century, there was a belief that certain moments, especially midnight, were thresholds. They belonged neither to one day nor the next. To interfere with them was unwise. Some clergy thought it possible to trap time itself between tolls. She smiled faintly, as if embarrassed by the superstition. But of course, that's all metaphor. I wanted to believe her. But metaphor didn't explain the 13 seconds of silence I'd experienced 2 nights before. I returned to my motel that evening, intending to transcribe my notes. Instead, I found something strange. The timestamp on my last audio recording had changed. It now read 12 hours exactly. That couldn't be right. I'd stopped recording before midnight. I replayed the file. Static, then faintly beneath the hiss. A sound like a bell trying to ring, but caught in its own echo. The recording lasted 13 seconds, then silence. The next morning, I drove back to the site one more time. The air was colder now, with frost whitening the grass. I wanted to see the base of the tower again, to be sure I hadn't imagined the writing on the hymnal page. As I reached the ruins, I noticed something glinting under a pile of fallen stones. I brushed the dirt away and found a fragment of metal. The curved edge of a bell, blackened but intact. Along its inner rim was an inscription so small I had to trace it with my fingertips. Tempus servat eos qui servant oram. Time preserves those who keep the hour. For a long moment, I stood there listening. The wind had died entirely. Even the birds had gone silent. And then, very softly, I heard the faintest hum, a vibration, almost imperceptible, rising from the bell fragment itself. It wasn't quite a sound, more like the memory of one. I pulled back, my pulse quickening. That was when I saw the footprints. They led away from the church, deep impressions in the wet earth. bare feet. Each print was perfectly formed, the toes slightly splayed, as if whoever had made them was walking slowly, carefully. They stopped at the edge of the clearing. I followed, against every instinct. The path wound through the trees, down toward what had once been the village square. The fog gathered again, rolling low across the ground. Somewhere within it, a figure moved, tall, indistinct, its outline shifting like candlelight through smoke. "Hello," I called. The figure turned. For the briefest instant, I thought I saw a woman, her face pale, her eyes reflecting light like glass. And then she was gone, leaving only the sound of ticking, faint but steady, echoing through the fog. That night, I rode until my hand cramped. I tried to convince myself that what I'd seen was a trick of the mist, a refraction of light, anything rational. But when I opened my notebook the next morning, I found words I didn't remember writing, scrawled across the final page in black ink. "Do not let the bell ring. The maker waits." The handwriting wasn't mine. I left Vermont 2 days later, telling myself I'd finish my research. Yet even as I crossed the state line, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something unfinished, or that something unfinished had followed me. In the rearview mirror, the fog still clung to the mountains, white and shifting. And somewhere in that distance, unseen but certain, I thought I heard the first faint chime of a bell that had not rung in 100 years. The return. 2 weeks later, I was back in Oxford, surrounded by the familiar clutter of my office. Half-open books, old photographs, the hum of campus traffic beyond the window. It should have felt safe, contained, rational. It didn't. The air felt wrong here, heavy, as if the fog from Vermont had found a way to follow me across the ocean. I unpacked my field bag, laying out the artifacts I'd brought home from Greybridge. The fragment of the bell, the Reverend's pamphlet, the photocopied letters, my recorder. The recorder's battery had long since died, yet when I plugged it in, its screen flickered to life. One file remained. Timestamp, 13 seconds. I didn't remember making that recording. 2. The recording. I pressed play. For several seconds, there was nothing, just the faint hum of static. Then, somewhere within it, a ticking began. Slow, deliberate, not mechanical, but human, like fingernails tapping wood. Then came the voice. "You crossed the hour," it said. It wasn't quite a man's voice or a woman's. It was somewhere between, echoing, stretched thin by distance or time. I froze, listening. "The 13th second remembers you," it whispered, "and it never forgets." The recorder clicked off. The display read 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds. That couldn't be. The time had changed while it was unplugged. 3. The investigation. I spent the next several days immersed in archives, trying to find anything about Greybridge's disappearance. I searched the Pell family's genealogy, the diocese records, even shipping manifests from the 1890s. What I found only made the story stranger. The final mention of the town appeared in a 1901 weather report. A low mist was observed lingering over the former site of Greybridge on the evening of March 3rd. The observer noted a sound resembling church bells, though no structure remains. After that, nothing. Every reference, every file, ended at the same place. 11:59. It was as though history itself stopped there. One night, while examining the brass bell fragment under lamplight, I noticed faint engravings I hadn't seen before. lines of text etched so lightly they were invisible until the metal warmed under my hands. It read, "When the 13th second tolls, the forgiven hour begins." Below it, scratched roughly as though added later, "We held it back once. We cannot again." The handwriting looked eerily similar to my own. 4. The visitation. I hadn't slept properly since returning to England. Every night, I dreamed of Greybridge, its empty streets, its fog, the feeling that something vast and patient waited behind every shadow. But one night, the dream changed. I was standing in the church again, except it was whole now, the walls unbroken, the air thick with candle smoke. The villagers were there, silent, lined up in pews. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow, hands clasped around broken clock pendulums. At the front stood the woman I'd glimpsed in the fog, her hair black as ink, her gown the color of bone. When she spoke, her voice was the same as the one from the recording. "You wrote the rules down," she said. "Now they know your name." "Who are you?" I asked. She smiled faintly, as though pitying me. "Amara Pell," she said, "the keeper of the forgiven hour." Behind her, it always did. 3. The letter that shouldn't exist. The next morning, a letter arrived on my desk. No return address, but the postmark read Vermont, USA. Inside was a single folded page of antique stationery, the same texture and yellowing as the Greybridge letters. It read, "Dr. Voss, we received your recording. The 13th second is active again. You must not allow it to complete the cycle. At the end of the hour, it will seek an anchor, someone who remembers the rules. You're that anchor now. When you hear the bell, do not listen. When you see her, do not speak. Eref, Ruth Fenwick, the Dartmouth historian." But when I called her number, a stranger answered. The man on the line told me Dr. Fenwick had died 3 months ago, before my first trip to Vermont. 4. The Museum of Lost Time. I traveled to London next, desperate for rationality, a clockmaker's explanation, a mechanism, anything human. The Horological Museum in Greenwich held one of the largest collections of antique timepieces in the world. The curator, a thin man named Mr. Alcott, agreed to meet me after closing hours. When I mentioned Greybridge, his expression darkened. "I've heard that name," he said. "One of our donations came from there, a long case clock, and signed late 18th century. It's peculiar." He led me into the storage wing, where dust-coated glass cases and the air smelled faintly of oil and brass. There it was, an enormous wooden clock, the face blank except for a single engraved line where the numerals should have been. "Forgive us." The pendulum was still, yet as I drew closer, the air around it trembled faintly, as though vibrating at a frequency below sound. "Why do you keep it here?" I asked. Alcott hesitated. "Because we can't destroy it. Every time we tried, the tools broke or the workers lost track of time. Literally. One man swore he spent 5 minutes dismantling it, but his shift ended 8 hours later." Whispering something I didn't remember saying. May time be kind. On the 7th night, I decided to test a theory. I synchronized 3 clocks, mechanical, digital, and atomic, to the exact same time. Then I sat in the dark, notebook ready, waiting for midnight. At 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 47 seconds, the ticking grew louder, though none of the clocks moved faster. The air itself seemed to hum. My heart matched the rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. At 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, I felt the moment stretch, not pass, but elongate like elastic drawn too far. The room grew weightless. Dust floated midair. Even the sound of my breath hung suspended. Then came the 13th second, not part of any clock, but real enough to feel. A long, resonant silence. And in that silence, a whisper right beside my ear. Welcome to the forgiven hour. When the clocks resumed, the time read 12 hours. But something had changed. The hands kept moving, yet the night outside my window did not. The sky remained dark. The world had forgotten how to reach morning. 6. The note. When I awoke, if I ever truly did, my desk was covered in sheets of paper, filled with writing I didn't remember. The words were fragments of rules, repeated over and over. Bow before the hour. Speak no sound between the 12th and the 13th. Never record the 13th second. At the bottom of one page was a new line, written in the same ink as before. You are its historian now. The university clock outside struck once, faintly, then silence. For 13 seconds. Then the ticking began again, slower this time, heavier. As I listened, I realized the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the recorder on my desk, from within its tiny speaker like a pulse. And beneath it, layered so faintly it could almost be mistaken for breathing, came a familiar phrase. May time be kind until the clock forgives us. I time out a joint. There's a rule in historical research. Never become part of the story. But somewhere between Greybridge and Oxford, I had crossed that line without realizing it. The 13th second followed me everywhere now. At first, I thought it was coincidence, a skip beat in a lecture hall clock, a frozen second hand during dinner. But when I started losing hours altogether, I stopped pretending it was random. Sometimes, I'd set out for coffee and find myself back at my office door without remembering the walk. Once I looked down to see my notebook open, 3 pages filled with neat handwriting I didn't recognize, my own but steadier, colder. The entries all began the same way. Observation. The forgiven hour persists. Subject, self. 2. Displacement. On the 3rd night of the new term, I left my window open. The air was strangely warm for November. At 11:58, I sat watching the tower clock through the mist. The campus was quiet, save for the occasional echo of footsteps on wet stone. When the bell struck once, I began counting 1 second, 2, 3. At 12, I should have heard the final chime. Instead, there was a pause. Then the silence thickened. The world outside froze. Raindrops hung, suspended mid-fall. The clock's pendulum stopped at its lowest swing. And then came a voice, not from the recorder this time, but from the open air. You're between the hours, it said. This is where we live now. The fog beyond the window shifted. A shape emerged, tall, human, but blurred at the edges, as if light refused to touch it. Its eyes glimmered faintly, like reflections on moving water. I tried to speak, but no sound came. Do you know what the forgiven hour means? The voice asked. It wasn't cruel. It was patient, curious, almost sorrowful. It means the clock let you go, it whispered. And now you belong to what remains. When the pendulum moved again, the world resumed. The rain fell, the bell finished its toll, and the shape dissolved into mist. My tea had gone cold. My watch read 11:59, but somewhere between Greybridge and Oxford, I had crossed that line without realizing it. The 13th second followed me everywhere now. At first, I thought it was coincidence, a skip beat in a lecture hall clock, a frozen second hand during dinner. But when I started losing hours altogether, I stopped pretending it was random. Sometimes I'd set out for coffee and find myself back at my office door without remembering the walk. Once I looked down to see my notebook open, 3 pages filled with neat handwriting I didn't recognize, my own but steadier, colder. The entries all began the same way. Observation. The forgiven hour persists. Subject, self. 2. Displacement. On the 3rd night of the new term, I left my window open. The air was strangely warm for November. At 11:58, I sat watching the tower clock through the mist. The campus was quiet, save for the occasional echo of footsteps on wet stone. When the bell struck once, I began counting 1 second, 2, 3. At 12, I should have heard the final chime. Instead, there was a pause. Then the silence thickened. The world outside froze. Raindrops hung, suspended mid-fall. The clock's pendulum stopped at its lowest swing. And then came a voice, not from the recorder this time, but from the open air. "You're between the hours," it said. "This is where we live now." The fog beyond the window shifted. A shape emerged, tall, human, but blurred at the edges, as if light refused to touch it. Its eyes glimmered faintly, like reflections on moving water. I tried to speak, but no sound came. "Do you know what the forgiven hour means?" the voice asked. It wasn't cruel. It was patient, curious, almost sorrowful. "It means the clock let you go," it whispered. "And now you belong to what remains." When the pendulum moved again, the world resumed. The rain fell, the bell finished its toll, and the shape dissolved into mist. My tea had gone cold. My watch read 11:59. It always did. 3. The letter that shouldn't exist. The next morning, a letter arrived on my desk. No return address, but the postmark read Vermont, USA. Inside was a single folded page of antique stationery, the same texture and yellowing as the Greybridge letters. It read, "Dr. Voss, we received your recording. The 13th second is active again. You must not allow it to complete the cycle. At the end of the hour, it will seek an anchor, someone who remembers the rules. You're that anchor now. When you hear the bell, do not listen. When you see her, do not speak. Eref, Ruth Fenwick, the Dartmouth historian." But when I called her number, a stranger answered. The man on the line told me Dr. Fenwick had died 3 months ago, before my first trip to Vermont. 4. The Museum of Lost Time. I traveled to London next, desperate for rationality, a clockmaker's explanation, a mechanism, anything human. The Horological Museum in Greenwich held one of the largest collections of antique timepieces in the world. The curator, a thin man named Mr. Alcott, agreed to meet me after closing hours. When I mentioned Greybridge, his expression darkened. "I've heard that name," he said. "One of our donations came from there, a long case clock, and signed late 18th century. It's peculiar." He led me into the storage wing, where dust-coated glass cases and the air smelled faintly of oil and brass. There it was, an enormous wooden clock, the face blank except for a single engraved line where the numerals should have been. "Forgive us." The pendulum was still, yet as I drew closer, the air around it trembled faintly, as though vibrating at a frequency below sound. "Why do you keep it here?" I asked. Alcott hesitated. "Because we can't destroy it. Every time we tried, the tools broke or the workers lost track of time. Literally. One man swore he spent 5 minutes dismantling it, but his shift ended 8 hours later. He glanced at me. "You shouldn't have come looking for it, Dr. Voss. That clock doesn't keep time. It holds it." Before I could respond, a low chime rolled through the building. Not from the clock, but from somewhere deeper, as if the air itself had found tone. Alcott's face went pale. "That's not supposed to happen," he whispered. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the floor. The pendulum began to swing, slow and heavy. The clock's hands, blank a moment before, appeared faintly, moving backward. And then the inscription changed. "Forgive her." I blinked. The letters shimmered, rearranging themselves like mercury. When I looked again, the glass reflected my face, and behind me, Amara's. The return of Amara. Her reflection stood perfectly still while I turned to face the real space. Empty. Only the hum of clocks ticking out of rhythm. But in the reflection, she moved closer. The pale outline of her face sharpened. "You're unmaking the hour," she said softly. "Every time you remember, it remembers you." "Why me?" I whispered. She tilted her head, the same faint smile I'd seen in my dream. "Because you wrote it down." The lights flickered. For a moment, the reflection showed not the museum, but the Greybridge church, whole again, filled with rows of silent figures. Their heads turned toward me in perfect unison. "Tell me," Amara said, "do you still hear the bell?" "I hear something," I admitted. "It's not always sound. Sometimes it's silence." She nodded. "That's how it begins." Then the reflection shattered. Not the glass, but the image itself, splintering into ripples that left me staring at my own reflection again, alone and shaking. 6. The forgiven hour. When I stepped outside, the sky had darkened too quickly, as if the evening had skipped a few minutes ahead. My watch, of course, read 11:59. Cars moved slower than they should. The streetlights flickered in time with my heartbeat. I walked along the Thames, trying to steady my breathing. The water was mirror smooth. Across it, Big Ben's tower stood tall against the mist, but its clock face was black, unlit. And then, faintly, I heard it. 1 chime, 2, 3, 12. Then silence. A pause long enough to stretch eternity thin. And finally, a 13th toll, soft as breath. The water below me rippled. Reflections twisted. In each shimmer of light, I saw a different hour. Morning, afternoon, dusk, overlapping like ghosts of time. And in every reflection, Amara watched from the edge of the water, her hands folded, her eyes fixed on mine. "You kept the 13th second alive," she said, her voice carried on the wind. "Now keep it still." 7. The historian's realization. That night, back in my flat, I opened my notebook again. The first page was blank. The second, too. Every note I had written from Vermont to London was gone. But at the very end, on the last page, a single line remained, written in my own hand. "History doesn't repeat. It waits." Underneath it, the same phrase that had ended every Greybridge letter. "May time be kind, until the clock forgives us." 8. The question. I've begun to wonder what that phrase truly means. Does forgiveness imply release? Or does it mean surrender? The people of Greybridge may not have vanished. They may have simply stepped sideways into that thin space between seconds where time cannot hurt them because it no longer moves. And now, every time my watch hesitates, I feel that place waiting, patient, silent, eternal. I can almost hear Amara whispering in the static. The hour forgives, but never forgets. The pause. I used to believe time was linear, that we moved forward and the past remained where it belonged. But lately, when the second hand falters, I see movement in the stillness. Shadows that weren't there before. Faces reflected in glass. Watching me. The world seems to hold its breath.